We made it happen. Jimmy was an incredible success. I don't know where he is. I gotta find him. Gosh, I don't. Oh.
Oh yeah, George. Oh, George.
Right here. Yeah.
We did it, brother.
Yes, we did.
Thanks to Dan. You know what? And in the ring with Dan and Benny. Hey, brother, man, he's about the most cat. I just love him to death. I love you. Thanks for having me. Hey, you're the best. I'm telling you, brother. In the ring with
Dan and Benny.
Yeah.
We love you. Thank you so much.
Mwah. Oh yeah.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of Dan and Benny in the Ring. I'm Dan Spasciano, joined as always by the playa himself, Benny Scala. Benny, how you doing, buddy?
Well, Dan, right now I'm actually suffering from a wrestling hangover from Friday until last night. I think I watched 17 hours worth. But in all honesty, I truly enjoyed WrestleMania 40 more than I have any WrestleMania in many, many years.
Very much so. It was great stuff. Obviously, we had some fun with our prediction shows. Joe got us. He got you by one, but I really loved the weekend. It was a lot of good stuff. You know, we were originally planning, and hopefully we'll work around it. This was going to be our big breakout in the live stream tonight. I was going to make a joke about how that was going to be biting off more than we can chew, but that sounded way too obvious of a pun for me. So, Benny, before we get to it, why don't you tell everybody who is joining us tonight?
Yeah, you know, Dan, since I am the poet laureate of the 30, which can be seen every Thursday night on the it can be seen every Thursday night on the Monty and the Pharaoh YouTube channel. But tonight, well, I was gonna say tonight was a historic night with us going live for the first time. So we had to do an audible on that. But we also I believe this might be the first non-wrestling show that we've ever done. So I do have a special pros with the playa. So here goes. Welcome to Dan and Benny in the Ring. Professional wrestling is usually our thing. But tonight we have a little bit of a twist. There won't be an eye gouge, a kick, or closed fist. Tonight we go live with a new attitude. Wrestling? Hell no. We're talking about food. Our guest consumes mass quantities of treats. He is competitive eater deluxe, Mr. Scott Eats. Scott, welcome to Dan and Benny in the Ring.
Oh, thank you so much, guys. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we again, this is when Benny first presented this, and I looked it up like I was talking before. You have some amazing content we're going to get to, but like Benny said, we got to get the obligatory wrestling question in before we get too off topic. So we always start with the same thing. We always ask our guests about when the wrestling bug bit you. Obviously, tonight's show is not wrestling. It's a completely different color for us. But Benny did share with me that you are quite the wrestling fan. So you think you could tell our listeners about your early entry into the fandom?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually was a fan of wrestling probably from the time I was like 5 years old. I watched it quite religiously, probably up until maybe around 12, until I started getting into other things. But so over probably around 40 years ago, I got into it. WrestleMania 1. I've collected figurines. I still have them in the storage underneath the stairs, the old wrestling figures. So, I used to watch WrestleMania, Saturday Night Live, or Saturday Night Main Event.
Yeah.
And I was a huge fan when I was younger. So I haven't watched much lately. I admit I've been into other things, family stuff, but I still love watching it once in a while if I can.
Sure. All right. Well, Scott, I can't begin to tell you what a treat this is for me and Dan as well. So we're both Italian, and most people eat to live, but Italians live to eat. And my mom was a world-class cook. I tell all my friends, well, my friends know it, that I literally grew up in an Italian restaurant. So back in the 70s, my brother and I was way ahead of my time, actually. My brother and I got kicked out of Howard Johnson's and all you can eat fried chicken night. I mean, I think between the two of us, and I was like 17, he was 11. I think we did 31 pieces. But now this is a story I've never told anyone other than my close friends. But this proves the Scala family's dedication to food. we were watching TV. My brother, my future sister-in-law, and myself watching TV. And for whatever reason, he was laying on the floor. She decided to do a Jimmy Snuka, and I literally gave him a flying knee drop, and I literally heard his ribs crack. That's how bad it was. So she had to drive him to the ER, but on the way, they stopped at Taramina's, which was our local pizzeria, and he ordered and ate a family-sized calzone on the way to the ER. Now that's dedication. And I said to him, like, how do they even, like, the X-rays? Oh, wouldn't they just see a blob of cheese? You know, like. But I mean, my point is, like, food is life for us. But when did you figure out that you had this extraordinary talent for consuming huge quantities of food?
Well, I don't know if it's a talent or not.
Oh, it's a talent, all right.
Well, I would say mostly, I think when I was in, not competitive, but into bodybuilding, I started bodybuilding when I was 18 years old. I did a lot of dieting and whatnot, kind of before and after photos I did for Gold's Gym. You would diet throughout the week, and then once a week you would do like these massive meals. And, you know, your cheat meal or your cheat day, whatever it was, back then it was a cheat meal. Now I've kind of extended it to cheat days sometimes. But I think that's when it kind of first started. But I think when I really got tested, I was probably about 30 years old. I was working in Vancouver as an electrician on the Canada line, and one of the guys talked about this massive pasta at a place called Anton's, and he's like, "Oh, it's crazy! You got to go there." So I went there, finished the meal, came back, and the guy was like, "So, what did you bring for leftovers?" And I was like, "Leftovers? I got this pen that said I ate the whole thing." And he's like, "Oh," he's like, "It wasn't like you didn't have any leftovers?" I go, "No, I could probably maybe even eaten two." He's like, "There's no way anybody could ever eat two." And I'm like, "Well, let's place a bet on it here, right?"
Oh, there you go.
So he placed a bet on it that I couldn't finish the 2 plates of pasta, and if I beat it, he would have to pay for my 2 plates plus give me, I think it was $50 or $100.
All right.
Yeah, and so that's kind of like my first time that I had ever been like challenged to like a competitive eating or a challenge. And so I think I would discover it then. And then throughout the years before it became like competitive eating, as in like a thing, I just went to a restaurant one time and they had this was almost a 5-pound burger. And if you ate it if you ate it within, I think it was an hour, you got it for free, or you had to pay $30 or whatever it was. So I was really into getting a large meal for free. So I did that a few times, and then I probably didn't do it for maybe five years after that. But then eventually it became a thing. So it was kind of a little sporadic, but it eventually hit good.
Wow, nice.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, obviously eating contests have been around as long as food has, but what we would consider like organized competitive eating really only been a thing since about the 90s. The formation of like Major League Eating and the popularity of social media has given it. What you were just saying, so this just really kind of evolved from you liking to eat and being able to eat a lot. There was no person, you know, who influenced you, or anybody that you saw on TV was like, "Oh, I can do that."
Well, I wouldn't say no. I mean, it was already in me a little bit to be able to do that. And I'm a very challenge-oriented or goal-oriented person. So I did start watching Randy Santel probably about 5 years ago, and I watched a bit of his stuff. And then he was coming to an area near me called Kamloops, and I decided I would go visit him there. So I met him there, almost did the challenge, believe it or not. I just didn't know. Sorry guys, I got someone calling here. I should put this. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay. All right. Can you see me still?
No,
Okay.
I can't.
Okay. Sorry about that. I had someone
That's all right.
call. Yeah, I had to switch to
There you
my
go.
computer. But anyways, I saw Randy there. Almost did the challenge. Not quite did it with him. And then eventually I'd done a few challenges, and then there was a challenge that needed 4 people to do it. And then I eventually got into meeting up with Joel and whatnot for doing some of these other challenges. So yeah, so that's kind of how it started. Watch Randy, watch a bit of Joel, and here we are about 5 years later.
Wow. You know,
Yeah.
I have to give a shout out to Randy Santel. He was here at a place called Kogi Grill in Largo. It was a 6-pound Korean, I think it was like beef, chicken, and pork challenge. And I was working in Clearwater, which is about 10, 15 minutes away. And I actually called Kogi Grill, and I said, when does the challenge start? And I'm going to be there. And I heard Randy Santel in the background saying, when is he going to, how long will it take him to get here? He actually held the whole thing up until I got there, which I thought was like, yeah, he was a really, really nice guy. So I wanted to give him a shout out. Plus we share the same birthday, June 24th, except I'm 100 years older than him, but not quite, but
same birthday, not year. Yeah,
exactly. But the average Joe watches a YouTube video, you know, whether it be you, Joe Hansen, Randy, you know, Katina, Molly, and they're entirely, I think for the most part, entirely clueless as to the amount of preparation involved to be able to do what you do. Like, so without giving away too many trade secrets, how do you actually train? Like, if I wanted to start training for a food challenge, what would I do?
Well, I mean, as far as what I did at the beginning, I don't train the same as I used to. I used to train a lot harder. I used to train a lot more with foods. Like I would train with frozen vegetables, and I would buy like a 4-pound frozen veggies. I would add it to some rice, chicken, and I would add fruit and any other vegetables. So I would get like 7-8 pounds of food, and then I would down it with, I don't know, a few liters of water. Depending 2 to 4 liters of water, depending on how it was. I don't actually do that anymore. I just found it just didn't necessarily fit into my lifestyle. It sounds weird.
Right.
So it just took up a lot of time, a lot of family time, a lot of work time, all that stuff, especially at lunches, trying to down, 8 pounds of food and 8 pounds of water in half an hour. It just doesn't work every day when you're trying to teach class. So, I mean, for me now, all I do is I'll have a meal and I'll have 4 liters of salt water. Salt is very important. If you don't have the salt, you can flush out your electrolytes. People have actually died doing that, having too much
water.
Water.
Interesting. Wow. Did not know.
So I always preface it by saying it has to be salt water, right? So I encourage no one to do it, but if someone was going to be doing it, it should be done a little bit safer. And I'll just have my food and a gallon of water. That's it. That's all the training I do within, basically 6 days a week. And then maybe 1 or sometimes 2 days a week, I'll do like an all-you-can-eat or some kind of buffet or some kind of challenge or something like that. So that's all I actually do now.
Okay.
For the most, unless I'm really training hard for something, I might add more food in there. But for the most part, that's kind of my training regime right now.
All right. Nice.
It's simple. Doesn't take up a lot of time.
Yeah.
I think it's too is that I've worked my capacity up to a certain level.
Right.
And now I'm maintaining it or
on maintenance now, like that, like, trying to maintain, right?
Mm.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Benny was listing some of the guys on the on the page. Speaking of he mentioned Joel Hansen. Speaking of Joel, you've done a lot of you've done some collaborations with him. Have you done much? And what kind of connected up that collaboration?
Yeah, I mean, Joel and I, like I said, we just went off of a tour about 2 weeks ago. We were on a tour.
Oh, okay.
So we just go for like a week and do challenges, basically like 1 a day, different places. But yeah, we just came off of that. And that's kind of like how I first started. How I met Joel was on social media. There was this, like I was saying before, there was a large 25-pound hamburger challenge or cheeseburger challenge, and you needed 4 people. And I had another competitive eater, but that's all we had. And we're like, well, if we're going to recruit, let's recruit the best, right? So
oh, yeah.
Joel was Canadian, and we messaged him, And so we ended up just setting up a time that he was going to come down to BC. And the 4 of us ended up doing the challenge that day. And then we did kind of like our very first tour. We did 3 more challenges the following 3 days. And now maybe once, maybe twice a year, Joel and I will hang out and eat some food and chill out and catch up and all that kind of fun stuff.
Well, that actually kind of segues into my next question, which is a wrestling related question. So back in the day, and this is like, we're literally talking in the 60s and 70s before, the WWE, the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance World Heavyweight Champion, would actually, wrestling had about 30 different territories. So Vancouver was one of them. Another one was Stampede Wrestling in Calgary, the Hart family. They had, there's several in Texas, WWE in the north, there's a Florida, Georgia, et cetera. But they'd go from territory to territory, and they might spend like a week. The champion would spend a week in each one, and they'd wrestle the local champion. So as far as your tours, like how far in advance do you plan your tours?
So how far in advance would be kind of it all depends. Sometimes it'll be. I mean, my tours depend on my main work schedule. So as you guys know, I'm not a professional eater. I don't consider myself a professional eater because I don't do it full time. It's not my main source of income. So I teach electrical construction at the college. So it is based around that schedule. So when I do have time off or I can book time off, it usually is a few months in advance that I can, but every once in a while I might, it all depends on if there's a good enough cash prize, I might be able to do it over a 4-day weekend, go somewhere, do a couple challenges. That doesn't happen very often, but for the most part, probably about 2 to 3 months ahead of schedule is how far I'd probably book some of these tours.
So what do you typically do, a week at a time?
Yeah, it's typically a week at a time. I mean, 2 reasons for that, like family obligations and also work obligations as well. And just a couple of different things going on that allows me to go for about a week at a time. More than 1 week is usually not conducive to that. So.
But you actually have gone overseas to show, correct?
Yeah, actually I have. I've gone to the UK. I think that's about the only place that I've really gone overseas was to the UK. Joel and I went there a year and a half ago, and we were there, I think it was about 16 days we were there. So we had quite the tour.
All right.
We went to the UK. We were in like Scotland. We were in Ireland, Northern Ireland. It was a really, really good trip. It's a good way to see the world,
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And eat. Jeez.
Yeah, absolutely. My years in the military traveling overseas, Scotland is probably some of the best food I've ever had in my life. I'd be curious if there was any like local fare eating challenges, potatoes, haggis, anything like that.
Yeah, we did have a breakfast, a Scottish breakfast at a place called Hogan's Sandwich Bar. So that was actually it was good. We had blood sausage, and we had the blood sausage, and we also had some hash brown, but first time being exposed to the blood sausage. So
that's cool.
It was definitely interesting. Let's just say it didn't end well after
I would imagine not.
But I actually liked it though, so it wasn't any testament to the food.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
You mentioned having the work obligations, familial obligations. Unlike a lot of eating and food-based personalities on social media, your family's very much involved. They've been in some of your videos. Your wife's done a couple of challenges with you. With the family obviously being so important, you mind sharing a little bit about your family?
Yeah, so I'm first of all, I'm not married, so but everyone calls her my wife.
Oh, okay.
No, it's all good. It's funny. I just go along with it. So Sarah's my girlfriend. We've been dating for 2.5, almost 3 years. We're a blended family. So she's got her daughter, Mila, who's turning 6 tomorrow. And then I've got my 2 girls every second week. So I've got
Oh,
Olivia.
all right. Okay.
Yeah. So I've got Olivia, who's 6, and Bella, who's 9. So we basically got a bunch of women in the house. 2 are 6, 1 is 9, and then Sarah, I'm not allowed to disclose her age. So, but
You're
it's
outnumbered there big time.
yeah, and so that goes back to my family obligations as far as being away from the girls for the week. So if I try to make it so that I go away the week that they're with their moms, at their moms, but if not, then Sarah would take care of them, and more than a week at a time would not be good. So she does her part. Let's put it that way. She does it.
Sure.
She does a really good for them.
Yeah, she really seems to enjoy herself when she's on camera.
Oh yeah,
So do the kids, though, for that matter.
Yeah, they do. They're all about being on the camera if they can be. They enjoy it. I mean, I think they enjoy the food more than anything. But one thing I do try and stress to them and other people as well, although I do eat like this on camera, you will probably see me 90% of the time that I'm eating like these large amounts or this type of food, I am on camera. So I do the same thing I did when I did bodybuilding, is that you got to eat healthy the rest of the week so that you can eat like this one meal a week, right? And I definitely encourage that. And I know I don't want to send the wrong message to people thinking that like I eat like that all the time or let my kids eat like that all the time, because that's definitely not the case.
That's actually a great segue into the next question, because one of the great things I've always loved about professional wrestlers is their incredible ability to be in character, when necessary, but then, of course, totally out of character when they're with their family. One guy that I remember from back in the day his name was George the Animal Steel.
Oh, yeah.
His real name was Jim Myers. I mean, they made him out to be a Neanderthal, but in reality, he had a master's degree and he was a high school football coach in Michigan. Okay. Yeah, and initially he would only wrestle during the summers because he taught and he coached, and then eventually he became a full-time wrestler. And when right in the early '80s when wrestling really became mainstream, he was actually pretty soft-spoken when he was Jim Myers. So that kind of leads, and you just mentioned it. So is a typical dinner at the Watkins household a typical dinner, or is it 7 or 8 Costco pizzas stacked up?
Yeah, definitely not. People would think it'd be, the 7 or 8 Costco pizzas, but honestly, most of the food that we have is, healthy chicken, rice, veggies, all the boring stuff. People, I would love to be able to make a channel where I put my regular eating on there, but no one wants to watch it. So that's why I put the once or twice a week meals that I do on there. But yeah, they eat really healthy. I prep my meals on Sunday, chicken, rice, veggies, kind of like two of those per day for 4 or 5 days. And then typically when I'm doing mine, I'll do Sarah's as well, where she doesn't have 2, she'll have one of those per day, kind of her lunch and my lunch. So yeah, definitely really healthy. If you saw the kids' lunch, you wouldn't, if you had to guess a bunch of different lunches, you wouldn't think they were my kids, because they eat so healthy when they, otherwise.
Right.
Yeah.
Excuse me. It's funny because we were talking a little bit before we started recording, about just some of the stuff, and you mentioned your foray in bodybuilding. I mean, Benny and I are both, just, you can tell by our godlike physiques, we're both big fans of old school bodybuilding. I mean, I know I watch Pumping Iron at least once a year. It's kind of my motivational film. And I understand, obviously, you are as well. You've mentioned it. You're into it, and you're obviously in great shape. But given the enormous amount of calories you consume during these challenges, I mean, is there any kind of special weight training routine that goes into the fact that you just went from a normal diet to 20,000 more calories than usual in one day?
I mean, there is. So it's a balance of both. So when I started competitive eating, I was actually probably weighed about 10 or 15 pounds, had 10 or 15 more pounds of muscle. So because of the way that bodybuilding is, where you have like, you eat 6 or 7 times a day, at least I was eating 7 times a day. I got constant protein. And now if I'm eating like a large meal in a day, I mean, I have, like I said, I've changed my training technique recently to still eat the same like 6 or 7 times a day, probably maybe 5 or 6 now. But so that's kind of changed to try and keep my body mass. But as far as the training, like my training has always been 6 or 7 days a week. And what I do is it's all about the calories in versus calories out. So if I eat an extra 10,000 calories on a day, that means the other, 7 days I have, or 6 days, I have to, cut my calories based. So the weightlifting I still keep at least 6 days a week. And then my cardio will change so that my weight is somewhat constant. So like if I'm getting too heavy, I'll do more cardio and then my weight will come down. If my weight's fine, I just leave it. Don't do any cardio. If my weight goes down, I just eat more. Sorry, getting message here from Sarah here. I'm just trying to figure out how I do this so the do not disturb comes.
Popular man today.
Yeah.
She's persistent.
Yep. Scott, I've seen you do like all kinds of challenges, and they're all enjoyable to watch. Pizza, burgers, sushi. Sushi's my favorite, but burritos, sandwiches, etc., breakfast, both speed and quantity. Do you have a favorite type of challenge? And on the flip side, are there any challenges that you really don't care for?
So, I mean, I guess it's not a type of food, but I prefer capacity challenges. I don't know why. I'm not as quick at eating. Like I've never been a speed eater. So I've always enjoyed more capacity. But as far as like favorite types of food, it honestly depends on the day and how often I've had it. For instance, I could not eat sushi every day. So when I'm on a tour and if I do a burger and then a burger and then a burger, I don't enjoy it, right? But if I've had sushi, steak, seafood, whatever, and then I go for a burger, it's like, okay, it's something a little bit different.
Like,
so
the monotony.
Yeah, I like mixing it up a little bit. I mean, if I had to choose like one place that I go to, it would be Tokyo One in Kelowna. There's a little plug for them. All you can eat sushi. I've gone to them for years. I love it. That's probably my go-to. But I also like, a steak dinner. I like pizzas. You name it. I like all different types. But it really depends on kind of like, what else I had. And even like, I don't know what I'll like tomorrow. If I was, tomorrow I might wake up and say, I feel like, steak. Maybe I don't. Maybe I just feel like a pizza, right? So
sure.
It definitely depends on the day. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That definitely makes sense.
One of the things, I mean, I enjoy for the most part is in the videos, the amazing service you seem to receive from the staff for your food challenges. But for some reason, you and Joel both seem to have issues with fish and chip establishments. It's like some kind of bit difficult to understand. I mean, both of your YouTube channels, you have a worldwide following, and I would think any food establishment owner would love to and be thrilled to have you there just for the publicity, among other things. And I mean, really at a relatively low cost of a few complimentary meals. Do you have any explanation for why it seems to be that way?
I don't know. I think a lot of times owners, maybe they don't know who we are, right? And not saying that I'm anyone special, but like to provide a little bit of publicity, even if they get a few people into the restaurant, would be worth it,
Yeah.
That word of. But I think I just don't think that a lot of owners, especially ones that have owned a business for a while, don't see the value in social media. They just don't get the whole social media game and realize that how expensive social media actually can be. If like Sarah's in marketing and communications and she says to run just like a YouTube ad for a company, or sorry, a Facebook ad for a company is in hundreds of dollars. So they're only hitting a few people, right? So I just think that they're just not social media savvy. Not that I am by any means. but they just don't get it. And I think maybe they see too short term and don't see the long term behind it. They're just thinking about tonight's profits or what it's going to bring right now. Because if you look at it, like even the one that the fish and chip that we got cut off in Langley, BC, the guy said that the fish was $50. So he wanted us to pay, and we were already paying $30. So he wanted to, like, he made an issue of paying $10 more each, which seemed, like you say, it seemed kind of funny because, you know, because of the whole social media thing. And even the thing that it surprises me sometimes is that we could be like no one that doesn't have a channel or has no social media presence and still do the same thing, but we're actually trying to promote, like especially with, if you got someone like Joel has a lot of people paying them good money to come to restaurants and promote their business. So I just think that they just aren't as savvy with the social media game, basically, and some of the newer restaurants. So, and why fish and chips? I'm not sure why. It's been more than once that I've been.
It always seems fish and chips, yeah.
Yeah, more than once that I've been booted from fish and chips. But yeah, I don't like to really do that anymore. So I do try and give the owners as much of a heads up as possible with that, because honestly, it's not a good feeling for me, right? Yeah. It's bad on both sides, because I've had it before where obviously the owners are mad because whatever's going on and they kick you out. But then I've also had on the flip side where people say they're going to order, you know, they're going to do these orders online and cancel the orders and stuff like that. And I'm like, no. Like, I don't want any harm to these companies. Like, just take it as it is. Like, it was, you know, it's kind of like a learning experience. And, you know, it's not like I'm going to ever go back to that restaurant again.
Right.
But I think people like drama. People like, you know, something unusual happening. So
yeah,
it's not the worst thing in the world for us, but it's still not a good feeling at the same time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, you've made one of my favorite things is when you go live, and you're usually at a restaurant. You're not eating at the, you know, the usual fast pace, but you know that allows you to interact with your fans, and you do have a very loyal following. And I notice how much you value and appreciate your fans. Can you elaborate that a little bit on that?
Yeah, actually, I mean, that's kind of one thing that has really kept me going is I feel like I have a pretty good loyal fan base here. And I just, you know, when you can talk about, you know, certain people or certain situations with your family, and like when your family recognizes viewers and stuff like that, you know, it's what keeps it going anyways. It is, I think, one of the big things that drives me is having those people, you know, because there's times you're like, well, I just doing a show, does anyone really care? Like, would anyone really care? But then, you know, you get a nice comment from a viewer that knows you really well and says something very personable, or like, oh yeah, no, you know, they compare you to maybe something you did 2 or 3 years ago. And it is a community, and even the fan base, the other competitive eaters, it is a small community, and you know, it does drive me to, you know, to keep doing it. On this note, I know it's not something that we talked about before, but last Monday I did have, speaking of loyal viewers, probably one of the, you know, a guy that I talked to twice a week on the phone that was a viewer, became a friend. His name was David Hawking. He passed at night. So they rest these days. It's been tough. We definitely miss him. It's been a little bit emotional for the last week here, but I do want to bring it up because he was missed.
Well, speaking of, I mean, speaking of the bonds, by its title, competitive eating is, I mean, competitive. You are, I mean, on the opinion of the show, we wouldn't have you here if we didn't. The upper echelon of competitive eaters. I mean, when they talk about names, you know, Joey Chestnut, Molly Schuyler, people like that, you've done collaborations with several of these folks. Many of the wrestlers we've had on the show through the years have talk about the lifetime friendships they forged on the road and the bonds, and sometimes the competitive rivalries that the friendly rivalries that become lifelong friendships. Do you have that type of thing with the other competitive eaters? Is that kind of what it's like? How's that work?
Well, I would say that it's not quite the same thing as wrestling, because you're not spending, like, for the most part, like Joel and I, yeah, that's one thing because we've done tours together. I think he's about the only one that I've done more than one tour with. So yeah, lifelong friends, definitely. But as far as a lot of the other eaters that I have done challenges with, I mean, there's one recent lead, a guy named Eli. That's literally his name, is a guy named Eli.
Yeah, I
But,
saw him.
I could see being lifetime friends with him as well. So, and there's other ones we're friends, but maybe not lifelong friends. We don't talk more than just about competitive eating. But either way, it's a great thing to have a bond, a common bond with these people, because I mean, really, it is an oddity. It's not a normal thing for people to be doing. So it is, you do create a bond over that. I'm just not sure if it'd be the exact same bond as spending, weeks on end or months on end with like the wrestlers, would do.
Yeah, they were literally on the road for like weeks at a time, night and day.
Right.
But, Scott, I've seen you all over the world, doing and actually winning food challenge. I don't think I've ever seen you lose a food challenge, but not only are you great at what you do, but the thing that I like the most is that you genuinely seem to enjoy yourself. So you mentioned earlier that you're very goal-oriented. Is there anything, as far as goals or plans for this year and beyond that you would want to share to our listeners?
Well, I do have a couple of things that are coming up in the near future. So in May 19th to 25th, I'll be in Las Vegas. Sarah and I will be there mostly on vacation, but I'm going to be doing a few challenges there. So anybody can get a hold of me on my Instagram, which I'll share in a bit, if they want to come see a particular challenge. I also share my challenges a lot of times on the community tab. It really depends on how certain I am about those times. But I'm also going to be going to the Pennsylvania area. So probably in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area and kind of surrounding states, end of July and beginning of August. So I'm going to meet a few eaters out there. A guy named Sean the Mouth Eats, hopefully a guy named Notorious Bob. We got Josh the Goat. So there's a bunch of guys out there that I've talked with, but I haven't met yet. So I'm really looking forward to that end of July, beginning of August. But that being said, I've been to a few places already. In February, I was in Missouri, Indiana, Illinois. I just came back from Seattle, so I've definitely been doing a lot of traveling. But those are kind of my two that are coming up in the next couple of months. After that, I don't know. I get a lot of time off at work here, so it depends on travel plans and what comes up, cheap flights, contests with money that will lure me over there to be able to continue my travels.
Sure.
Yeah.
Nice. I was gonna, as we kind of wrap up, I know you've got schedules today. I was gonna end with asking you about self-promotion, but you hit that, so I've got to ask. We were talking about it before. The video of mine that sticks out, or video of yours, that sticks out with me, is the 14-pound steak challenge. There's
Right.
a fun story behind that. Other than how do you approach that? You got to tell our listeners a story you were telling us before we recorded too.
Yeah. So, the how do I approach the actual challenge? Well, there was basically 3 days of prep in front of it. So I did this huge meal probably 3 days before, and then I kind of liquid fasted for 2 days or so before the actual challenge. I flew from Kelowna specifically to Edmonton, Alberta to do that challenge because I just knew it was going to be a good challenge. It had been unbeaten in I can't remember, like 8-10 years since it had been around. They made the challenge so it was unbeatable, they kind of said. And it was, if you guys follow hockey, a guy named Ryan Smith, he was the captain of the Edmonton Oilers. It was part of his management group, I guess it is, at Lux 94 Steakhouse. So I was really looking forward to it. And when I was going there, I thought it was going to be a 10 to 12 pound challenge because that's the way it was advertised on this website, not on their website, on a different website. And so when I showed up, I knew the steak was going to be 6 pounds, and then there was going to be sides. But the sides I thought were going to be, 4 to 6 pounds. And I knew where my capacity was. Well, I started weighing things as they're adding the salad, and they're adding the vegetables and the lobster mac and cheese, and they're adding the cake. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing is ridiculous. And it weighed almost 14 pounds. It was over 13 and a half, just under 14. And I'm like, oh, this is insane. But I was like, I specifically paid for the flight to get there. I took the day off. I had a round trip the same day. I'm like, I'm not leaving. I've got to try this out, right? And so I am one of those competitive eaters that even though I think I may have bitten off a little more than I can chew, I'm still going to try and go for it. So I just went for it. And, you think you have a plan until you get punched in the face, and then your plan changes. So I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to tackle it. But, I wanted to start off with what the hardest part of the challenge was, which was the steak. Started that, and it was just chewing, you name it. And I was just trying to figure out, like, okay, is it the chewing that's going to be hard, or is it the flavor fatigue? And you're just really trying to, like, okay, do I mix this food with this food, or, how's it? I even go as far as, like, how's it going to sit in my stomach? If it's a Tetris, right? You can't just eat all solid foods and then more liquid foods on top, because if you do that, then it's the solid foods kind of take up more space. So you got to kind of try and fill it in with liquids or stuff that will fit in between. And then you want some water, but you don't want too much water. If you have too much water, you're going to fill up. If you don't have enough, the pieces won't move around. So there's a whole game plan.
The whole science to it, geez.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's an exact science, but, you just try and logically think what makes sense. I try not to have carbohydrates first for most of my challenges, unless it's like an 11-pound roll where you've got no choice.
Right.
But, I try to have the meat first so that the carbs don't get to you. Yeah, it gets to your head, and it sometimes also you can get cramps from having too much carbohydrates. So you get the carb cramps in your fingers. So if you ever seen my 11-pound cinnamon roll challenge, you'll see I'm like,
oh, I've seen that. Yes.
Yeah. You shaking your hand. I wondered about that. That's crazy.
Yeah. So that's just the carb cramps, right? But it was actually overall, it was a decent challenge, and to keep you, excited about what's coming up, I have a challenge. I've just talked with the restaurant owner here recently, and it's a local challenge, and I'm trying to set up something very similar, maybe a little bit bigger than that.
Oh, jeez.
The next.
Well, really, Scott, it's funny that you said as far as the protein first and then the carbs, but one of my favorite videos is the endless pasta bowl. I think you did 20 bowls at the Olive Garden, and you're doing carbs and meat at the same time.
Yeah.
How'd you do that? But you seem to enjoy it.
That was 15 pounds, and I didn't know how to I wasn't sure how to market that per se. Like, do I go, most food ever eaten at Olive Garden? Do I just go endless pasta, whatever? But I just went, it was pretty simple. The video didn't even start off doing that well, and then eventually it's become one of my best videos that I've ever put out.
That's one of my favorites. Yeah.
Yeah, because I almost didn't record that because it was such a tight quarters. It was one of my last videos with my old camera, so we were in really tight quarters. So I was just like, oh, the lighting's not that great, whatever. I'm like, whatever, I'll film it. But as far as eating it, I don't know, you prep that one. I think I prepped for probably a day or two beforehand, where I did my liquid fasting. or dieting or however you want to call it.
Right.
And yeah, I was preparing for a contest that I had a couple days later. So I just wanted to get a good stretch and then take a couple days off before the contest.
Sure.
You know, I must say this has been really enlightening, because you wouldn't think about, you know, when you start getting into 10, 11, 12 pounds of food. I mean, the body's reaction to how it processes protein and processes carbs and sugar. And like you said, having to eat to intentionally Tetris your stomach.
Yeah.
Are these things that someone like helped explain to you when you got into it? Is this trial and error? How do you figure these out?
I mean, there's a lot to it. Like, I know Joel's helped me out. Some of the stuff I learned on my own, some of it, you know, you get, you know, some help from other competitive eaters. But I mean, most of my stuff has been, you know, either with hanging out with Joel or learning on my own. So like there's a set of not rules, but general rules. And then you kind of just change them to your methods, you know, to how you eat, right? And whatnot. So you do have these set of rules, but ultimately in the end, it's going to be up to you to really push your limits. Because I can tell you how to do it, and I can tell you everything, but doesn't mean that you're going to be able to do it, and vice versa. You tell me how to do a podcast and all you want, but it's not necessarily going to, maybe not going to be as good as you guys, right? It's trial and error as well, right? And kind of natural intuition eventually to kind of reflect those things.
Absolutely.
That's fair. Well, we don't want to keep you any longer than we agreed. Benny, as we wrap up, final thoughts to you?
Well, no, I just Scott, as far as the self-promotion, where can we find you?
So my number one is going to be YouTube. So Scott Eats, EATS. Scott with 2 T's on YouTube. That's where I get, most of my views and whatnot. And then I've also got an Instagram page, which is Scott Eats a Lot of Food, and all one word. And then I'm on TikTok as well. I haven't done a ton of TikTok, but it's Scott Eats 1, the number 1, and that's it. So those 3, that's where you can find me. I do have emails if people want to sponsor a challenge. I've got a bunch of like PayPal or Interact and stuff like that. But that's all at the bottom of my description of all my videos. It's kind of cool. I find it really cool when people, will send me stuff, hot challenges or whatever else. And, they send them to my P.O. box and I'm like, oh, what do I have here? And I'm like, oh no, the toe of Satan. Great. So it looks like we're going to be eating the toe of Satan with Sarah here.
It's funny. Well, my final question as we wrap up, you talk a lot about eating large challenges. My wife is from Texas and we've traveled all over. Have you ever, let me rephrase the question. What's the difference between a large food challenge and some of these food challenges where it's just an endurance? Like you have to eat 6 chicken wings, but you need a welding mask to even look at them. Like the super spicy food, the hot. It's not a quantity thing. It's just, that when the food is so spicy, all you taste is pain. Like, I notice you kind of avoid the endurance challenge more than the food. Is there just not your style or not as fun?
It goes back to what you were saying before. Do you try and avoid anything? I don't really try and avoid like heat challenges or anything like that. I'll do them. They do really typically do well for the videos as well. And they're a lot easier. Like to take in 12 spicy hot wings. You could be in and out of a restaurant in less than an hour, half hour. So those are easier, but it's there's not a ton of challenges in places. So it really depends on, where the challenges are and where you're going. And you just try and basically figure, what the viewers want to see. Right. And I don't really try and shy away from too many challenges at all. So just kind of, as long as it's in the area, I'll probably do it as long as I think the viewers will enjoy it. And as long as it's not going to physically kill me, we'll
entirely fair. And like you said, you've got your Vegas tour coming up. Anybody that's ever been to Vegas knows there's eating challenges on every corner. So you're definitely going to have some fun out there. So like you said, Scott Eats on YouTube. Dan and Benny, obviously, we can be heard anywhere podcasts are listened to. For Scott Eats himself, for the playa Benny Scala, I'm Dan Sebastiano. Have a good night, everyone, and we will see you next time on the ring.
All right.